Next panel, achievement panel, the truth about achievement. Today, I've asked my colleague, board member of the World Affairs Council, Brad Ringleb of KPMG partner, have the privilege of introducing today's fantastic achievement panel. Brad, it's all yours.
Thank you, Sandhya. Good afternoon, everybody, and happy International Women's Day. It's really great. As Sandhya mentioned, I have the privilege to sit on the board of the World Affairs Council, and I can't tell you how great of an organization the World Affairs Council is and all the programs they put on. So really great organization. It's really great to see the group in front of me. As Sandhya mentioned, you know, this was something that we've never done before, and I'm really glad to see the turnout that we have today. So it's my pleasure to introduce the panelists and the moderator to the achievement panel. First, we have Anna Denena as a partner at RSM, and Anna is a seasoned professional with 30 years of management experience, with deep knowledge of construction, manufacturing, distribution, real estate, and primarily focuses on the energy industry. Over her career, Anna has worked with private companies, beginning their life cycle, taking private companies public, as well as working with other public enterprises. And Anna also sits on the board of directors of the Ronald McDonald House of Houston. Everybody give a warm welcome to Anna. Okay, next, Heidi Cruz, who's managing director of Goldman Sachs. Heidi's been managing director at Goldman since 2012 and works with individual and institutional clients across the country. She's previously served in the George W. Bush administration as economic director for the Western Hemisphere at the National Security Council and director for Latin America at the U.S. Treasury Department. Locally, Heidi sits on the board of directors for Greater Houston Partnership. Everybody give a warm welcome to Heidi. And then we've also got Vanessa Wyche, director of NASA's Johnson Space Center. NASA's Johnson Space Center is home of the International Space Station, Mission Control Center, Astronaut Corps, and the Orion and Gateway programs. Previously, Vanessa has also served as director of the Exploration, Integration, and Science Directorate, deputy director of the Johnson Center, and flight director for the Space Shuttle program. Everybody welcome Vanessa. And finally, the panel is going to be moderated by Lisa Shumate, General Manager of Houston Public Media, as well as Associate Vice President of University of Houston System. Lisa's held numerous executive leadership roles at a variety of major telecommunications companies. She's also a published author writing Always and Never, 20 Truths to a Happy Heart. And you've got this, the real skills you need for career success. Everybody welcome the panel, and I'll hand it over to you, Lisa.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be with everyone today. I appreciate the wonderful introductions and this panel. Wow, I can't wait to talk to each of you about achievement. And I think for this discussion, we should go back to when we were little girls and we thought about what we wanted to be when we grow up. Like, who inspired you when you thought of yourself as a grown-up? Who did you want to be? Anna, do you want to start with that?
Well, thank you. So my background, I grew up in a large Italian family. My family farms and ranches, century farming and ranching operations. So I had a lot of role models to choose from, very entrepreneurial. Everyone in my family has done something where they built their own business. So when you look out over time and think about role models, what I learned or what I gleaned is you can pick pieces from different individuals and create your role model. What is it that you see that you want to achieve and how you want to achieve it? And everyone has different skill sets. Successful people have different skill sets. And trying to draw those best attributes from different individuals, I think, is what creates an ultimate role model, or how to go about finding what a role model can be to you and whatever it is that you might want to achieve, professionally as well as personally.
Vanessa, what did you want to be when you grew up?
So I grew up the youngest of 5 in a family. Okay, there we
There
go.
we go.
Being an engineer, I should be able to do that. So I grew up
Had to check.
the youngest of 5 in my family. My parents were both educators. So I got to see my mother go to work, and she taught elementary school. And I got to help her set up her classroom every year and, her welcome the children in. But I also got to experience my mother teaching adults how to read. And that experience, plus my father, if you are anything know about being a school teacher, you have to have more than one job to have a family of 5. And so my father had many jobs. One of his jobs was also to be the director of our community center. And I got to see my father empower women. He empowered the girls, he empowered the boys. And in our family, my father made sure that all of the girls and my brother could do anything, each other. So my brother is a really good cook, and my sisters and I know how to do a lot of mechanical things. So from that, it kind of inspired me that I loved science all the way from being a little girl. And I wanted to just figure out how to make things work. I actually took things apart, a lot of that as a child. But it was my temporary biology teacher. Her name was Mrs. Lane. And she saw in me that was really what I loved. And she said, you can do this as a career. And I really hadn't thought about it as being a career. But Ms. Lane, she was a force to be reckoned with. She was a very petite woman, and she always carried herself with such poise and grace, but she was super smart. And I was like, I want to be like her. And so I would say between, as you said, you take different people, but between my mother, between Mrs. Lane, my Girl Scout teachers, my grandmothers, those were the women that were my role models, but also my father, because he was the one person that always said to me, no matter who you were, girl, boy, whatever, your race, whatever, that you can be and do anything you want as long as you're willing to work for it. So those were my role models.
The greatest gift, right?
Yes,
Definitely.
indeed.
Heidi, how about you?
So I think there's some common themes. Let's see if this, I'm not an engineer, so will not master this skill. Some common themes with what my colleagues have said. I think having your own business and creating your own destiny, and also having that confidence and ability that you can do whatever you set out to do with work and effort. I grew up in California. And my father was a dentist. My whole family's in the medical field. And I grew up in the 70s and 80s. And I was recently meeting with a friend of my daughter. I have a 14-year-old here in Houston, and she has a friend who's 16. And I took her 16-year-old friend to coffee to try to get some perspective on what this generation thinks of us. And it relates
I'm sure
to this
that was
topic.
interesting.
So since we're all probably largely in the same generation, I thought I would share what she said. She said something that was interesting when we think about our childhood. She said, your generation is very selfish. And it sounds like a downer, but I thought about that, and I thought about history and how every generation has opportunities and lessons that we've learned. And our grandparents maybe grew up in the Great Depression or just before, and they bred our parents who had the opportunity to get an education and didn't have to have jobs to barely put bread on the table. And they give us an education to dream big, which everyone in this room has done. And you became a partner at a firm where you're growing lots of small businesses. You became a leader in an engineering field in NASA and space. And I wanted to go to Wall Street. And I think I heard my 16-year-old new friend say how selfish we were. And she said, you guys all also think that we're not as smart as you and that we don't work as hard. And I kind of thought, well, maybe on the work hard front. So we're selfish and we work really hard. And I reflected on that and thought, in some ways, it's kind of true. We've had so much opportunity. We had the 80s where women really came to be in the corporate world. A lot of glass ceilings were broken. We had the 90s where technology really took off. I feel quite young, but in my first job, we did not have the internet on our floor. It was only my second year as an analyst when there was one terminal that you could log on to this thing and do some research. So I think there's some of our dreams were formed by kind of when we were born, and I always wanted to go to Wall Street. My father had this small business as a dentist. We did a lot of work for my parents. They had 14 acres out in California. They did everything themselves. He built our home. We laid the cement of our driveway. We used to pick berries in the summer and harvest wheat in the summer in the field. And my brother and I told him that we thought we were working a little too hard. We needed some pay for this. And he said, well, why don't you start a company then if you want to be paid? That's how capitalism works. I was 6 and my brother was 8. So we did. We started a bread baking business. We had it for about 12 years, and it was great, but it really taught us work ethic. I went to D.C. on an internship and then to Wall Street on an internship. And my role models, incidentally, I think there were a lot of women leaders at the time, for sure. But one of my role models was here in Houston, Jim Baker. And little did I know I would have the chance to live in your great city. I moved here in 2005, and I had the opportunity to work for Condoleezza Rice, and I'd say she was really a role model for me, not so much even just politically, but just as a strong woman who combined leadership with grace, a firm hand with a listening ear. And the thing that I think about when I think of Condi is how she really executed her job on behalf of the president in those years with no sort of hidden agenda. And there was sort of a fairness that I think gained her a lot of respect.
Thank you. Well, this isn't the first rodeo for this panel, I can tell. And every time you're introduced, we hear about the achievements, right? And as we all know, a lot of those achievements come about through twists and turns. And so relating back to the earlier panel that talked about diversity and making mistakes, would you open up a little bit about something that didn't go right, that in effect opened a door you might not have gone through had it not happened? Anna, can we talk with you first?
Certainly. I think someone said it earlier, an introduction of today is when you have lemons, make lemonade. I think everything happens for a reason, to help us be better, a better person, better professionally, better personally. And it's really having the ability, I think, although it may not seem so at the time, to really pause and reflect on, and maybe it's not at the exact moment, but maybe years later, potentially, and saying, wow, that really was the best thing that could happen to me. In terms of my 30-plus year career, I started my professional career in public accounting with Coopers & Lybrand, became PwC. Really in college, I actually wanted to be a finance major and go to Wall Street, but unfortunately the economy wasn't very good when I was graduating, and I was like, well, all my friends that are accountants are getting jobs, so I guess I better do that.
It's worked out.
And it worked out really well. And then over time, I was at PwC for 20 years, a partner, and you never know when opportunity is going to knock, or you accomplish so many things in the firm. I worked on our large public registrants. They were very active doing something. I got an opportunity really to work in the energy space, doing everything from the wellhead to the burner tip. And I have to admit, at different times, I felt like the fireman. I was always put on the most challenging, complex circumstances, and I was just like, every time I would get a call from a partner, hey, we want you to do X, I was like, okay, really? I do have a life as well, and I would always say, well, these are the things I want to accomplish, and I was always very fortunate. I felt like that I had great advocates, but I also had folks that gave me great advice. So I think it's really important to always listen when there's something that happens that's maybe not something that you feel like is best for you, or it's a situation that it's really detrimental, you feel like, to what you're trying to accomplish. Listen to what other people have to say, because what one door may be closing, it may be opening many others. And there was a point in time where I just really became very tired, in terms of what I was doing, and I realized I was out playing golf one day, and someone came up to me and they said, this is only the 5th time I've seen you on the golf course. And I have to admit, I grew up playing competitive golf. I love to be outside. I love athletics. That's something else I encourage for everyone is to be involved as they're growing up in some sort of athletic opportunity, because you get to build teamwork skills and interact with others, but also learn how to handle adversity, which I think is part of your question. Learning how to handle adversity and take that and move on to something else. And that was an aha moment for me, actually, because I realized that I was so involved in what I was doing that I was really missing part of my life, and I needed to have a change. So I ultimately ended up leaving PricewaterhouseCoopers and then going to a little bit smaller firm, but that opened another door, and then I got a call from a headhunter about an opportunity to lead the finance function at Saudi Refining. So I got an opportunity to go in, and I was the second highest finance executive for Saudi Aramco in the United States, which who would have thought that a female would have gotten that opportunity? But it was always really interesting when folks would ask me, "You work for the Saudis?" And I would say, "Yes." And I would say, "So what is it like?" And I would give the answer that they just wouldn't believe that I would say. Well, it's not really any different than any other large family-owned business. And they thought I would talk about, the female concept. But what I learned from all of that is they were looking for quality. They were looking for folks to help them be successful. And they didn't really care whether I was female, what my nationality was, but they wanted to identify quality and folks to help them be successful. So I see Georgianne here in the audience, and I know she's going to be leading the next panel, or one of the panelists subsequently. But, she and I work together there as well, and I think she would probably echo some of the same things. You really have to look at what opportunities come next when that one door closes. You never know what it will be. But I have to say, that opportunity gave me the ability to continue to grow as a professional, but also from a personal perspective. And you think about interacting with others and other cultures. It really was something that I think added to me as a professional, and then ultimately helped me in terms of what I wanted to do next. Coming back to public accounting and RSM, I now co-lead our energy practice for the U.S. firm. So, everything builds on itself, and you've just got to figure out how to continue to build that foundation as those different doors close and others open.
There you go, Vanessa.
Well, somewhat similar. I will say, being flexible, but taking risk, right? Mm-hmm. And, not being afraid of failure. And so I will say, I'll give an example. So when the shuttle program ended, we had already started a program to go to the moon. It was under the Bush administration called Constellation Program. And we were, well on our way. We had done a lot of tests. And so both of those things were ending at the same time. And I had to help the people in my organization find jobs. Some of them were able to get jobs in oil and gas, so thank you. Being in Houston is great because we have other industries that we can move in and out of. But then for myself, I decided that I was going to go from being manager of a shuttle mission that I wanted to move into the executive ranks. And so to do that, I had to apply for positions. And so I will tell you one position I was applying for actually would have had me move to Washington, D.C. And at that particular time, my husband here, very supportive, always very supportive. And so he was on board, and my son was in school in Washington, D.C. So it was kind of, okay, things will be fine. If you have to move, we'll make it work. And I applied for the position that I clearly was the most highly qualified for. I'm just going to say that.
We believe you. We believe you.
And I interviewed, and so then I got the call that, well, we thought that you were really good, but we want to put, I'll just call him Bob, in that job. I said, okay. And so then one of the people that was on the interview panel called me up, and he said, I just want you to know that you had the best qualifications, and I don't understand why you weren't an executive before now. It must be all those good old boys down in Texas that have been holding you back. And I said, okay, fine. But what I said to myself was, that may be one no, but that's not going to be the end of the story. So,
Yes.
so I kept applying, and finally, the position where you mentioned, where I was director of our exploration, integration, and science area, was then when I was able to finally break that barrier and get to that level. But it took me and most of my career, being maybe sometimes the only woman in the room, the only person of color in the room, just having confidence in myself and knowing that if I, kept at it, not let others define who and what I could do, that I could push through and break those barriers. So I would say that would be an example. I have a lot of them, but
Well, Vanessa, I just want to thank you for sharing that, because I don't think people look at you and think you ever didn't get a job you wanted. And so it is, I think, reassuring to anyone out there who's ever, it can be so discouraging. You know you're qualified and you're not there. But the twist and turn that clearly worked out in the end. How about you, Heidi? I'm sorry, were you finished? I didn't mean to cut you off.
I'll stop.
Okay.
I'll come back later.
All right. All right.
So I love, Vanessa, is that on? Okay. I love what you said about Bob, because my 14-year-old, somebody asked her about 6 months ago if she ever wanted to be in politics, which is a resounding no for her. And they asked her, would you ever want to run for office? Do you think a girl will ever be president of the United States? And she said, oh, no, you have to be white, male, and pretty old to run the most successful, powerful country in the world. But we will, in our generation, break this, because I think there's so much that's been achieved. We have a brand for women at Goldman Sachs called In the Lead. And my job at our firm as head of client development for our division was to go do a global study of all the female business leaders, well, not just business leaders, but female leaders in the world, to see kind of who is the highest net worth and most influential to be a client of our private wealth business, and who should be sort of our prospect base. And when you get out there and look at the 500 names that we came up with, women have achieved so much. There's not a field of study or an area of leadership or expertise, from the hard sciences to more generalist roles, that women haven't risen to the top. So it was kind of an exciting thing. I have had many failures and setbacks along the way. I was thinking of one that was very early in my career that has really helped me to succeed later on, to realize that at every stage, it's a grind. At every stage, things will be there that won't go exactly your way. And if you're very real with yourself about where you're adding value in your organization and how you can pivot to make sure that you're really adding the value that's needed in your business organization, I think you can be a much more grounded professional and leader. I was raised in California, but my parents were missionaries for much of our life in Africa. And so we would go back and forth, and lived in Kenya, in Nairobi, and in Nigeria, in Kano, Nigeria, and Nairobi, Kenya. And I came out of sort of grade school and into college having had that very international experience in a third world country, and seeing the enormous disadvantage when you don't have an economic system or a legal system that allows you to build a business and to get an education. And my parents also had taken us to the East Coast to see New York and Washington, D.C., and I wanted to be on Wall Street. So I applied to J.P. Morgan and was fortunate to receive an offer to be in the investment bank. And so I was most certain that, as one of 70 in the freshman class at J.P. Morgan, with my international background, that I would be able to work in our international area of the firm. The firm at J.P. Morgan is very international. And I arrived, pale skin, speaking no languages, to a sea of international students whose parents ran the industries in Europe and Latin America. My dream was to work in Eastern Europe and help convert the communist bloc to capitalism. There was a stock market being formed. Latin America was privatizing at the time, the end of the 90s. This was before Venezuela went down the route of Chavez. And I was very excited, most certain I was going to have a job in the international world. And after our 3-month training program, there was a long list of where everyone was placed, and I was put in U.S. commercial mortgage-backed securities. And I thought my career had ended before it started. But I went to that group, and I worked really hard, and I learned great modeling skills, and I took Spanish at night, and at night for an investment banker means at 4 a.m. So I studied Spanish, and I eventually got into the Latin group. But it taught me very early that no matter how qualified you think you might be, and no matter how much you may want to do something, the world's competitive. You may not get what you want, but you need to develop skills to where you can really contribute, and you kind of have to pivot along the way. And I don't think I was probably my Spanish was the worst in the group. I stayed a few years and went to business school, but I think it was good to do something that I really wanted to do as well. And I always encourage younger people to write that thesis, write that paper, go after that subject matter that you're really passionate about, even if there is stiff competition.
Vanessa, I want to go back to something that you said, because it ties into what Heidi says, is that no was the first no. Where do you get the resilience to, what do you tell yourself to pull up and keep going?
Yeah, so to me, you have to maybe, for me, I can go back to my childhood, being the youngest of 5 siblings, and having to push my way into they were going to all go skating and leave me behind, right? So that's that beginning of starting to say, I can, you're going to include me. But it's just the I think Heidi kind of touched on it a little bit, of having to know that it's going to take a little bit of grit. And sometimes you have to learn new skills. You have to do things differently. And so in that particular incident, where that no, I said to myself, okay, well, there are certain things that I cannot do differently, but maybe there are things that I can do differently. And so for me, that meant understanding the value, and maybe the last panel probably talked about it some, of sponsorships. And so at the particular time, my husband was reading Colin Powell's autobiography. And I told him, I said, hey, I have an opportunity to take a job, and a lot of the guys at work are telling me, don't take that job because it's really going to look like a demotion from the outside. And so, George said, wow, Colin Powell went through the same thing, and he took the risk. And he said, but when he did that, it was going to put him in a position where he could be with people that could see his skills. And I just took a leap of faith. My external mentors were all telling me, don't do it. But, that little voice inside said, no, you're going to have to trust your gut. And so I did. And so I took a position on staff, a staff position, which a lot of people may know that people say, if you do that, especially in the tech world, it's hard to get back onto the management leadership track. So I did that, and then had the opportunity to have more exposure to others, so that when the next opportunity came, then it was more difficult, let's say, for them to say that they were not aware of my skill sets, because they clearly had seen me on a regular basis, so that they then could not deny that I was capable of doing the job.
Excellent, excellent. Did you want to add something, Anna?
Sure, I would say, and I think the theme that we're hearing here is that everything is a building block. You just got to figure out what that building block is in terms of what you're wanting to achieve in your career or otherwise. And if there's a risk associated with that, take it. That's what entrepreneurship is about. That's what growing is about, is taking a risk. Grow as a professional, grow as a person. And, things will work out. Look forward, don't look back. And that's, I think, another key thing that's always important. Don't dwell on something or a decision, even if, someone's telling you it might be risky. Look forward and then use that to continue to grow prospectively.
So now I want to just take maybe a broader look at the word achievement. Because, David Brooks wrote a book in which I can't remember the title of his latest book, but he talks about, the resume aspect of achievement, and then sort of the tombstone, or what they would say at your funeral, about achievement. So I don't want to go that far, but I could say this. I could say you're getting your Lifetime Achievement Award. what do you want them to be saying about you? You know, holistically about you as a person and your achievements as a whole person. All right, Anna, I'll start with you.
Well, that's a great question. So, personally, I think you heard in the introduction, I think it's really important to give back to the community, to give back to others. That was something that was ingrained in me from an early age, and to help others be successful. And it's doing it not at the expense of others. You know, if you're achieving something, but there are others that that you have to take advantage of for whatever reason, to me, that's not achievement, it's not success. So I would have to say integrity, quality, ethics. Those are the three things that I think defines achievement, and then also giving back to others and helping others be successful and to kind of grow in their career path. In terms of what others have said to me, what I see as myself being successful or achieving things is when others come to me and thank me and talk about how much I help them. Whether that be in something I'm doing in the community to give back with the Ronald McDonald House or other organizations I've been involved with, or it's folks that I've worked with over the term of my career, and whatever role that might be, where they come to me immediately or later on in life, or just drop me a note to say how much they are so thankful for what I did to help them be successful.
Go ahead, Vanessa.
You know, so for me, you know, achievement, I look at it as, you know, we can achieve our personal goals, but then what have we done to help society move along, move forward? And so you know, anybody that knows me knows that I'm a big proponent of STEM. I'm a big proponent of girls being in STEM because I'm just a true nerd and I love it. and I you know, want to share so that other girls can know that, you know, if they want to be, you know, an astronaut, a doctor, a dentist, whatever it is that they want to do, that they, you know, have and can be and do that. You know, I would say what I would like to have said for me, maybe my tombstone is that, you know, she left the world a better place. You know, what did I do to make this world a better place? I will tell you that my parents, my grandparents, my grandfather was a minister, you know, being and supporting and doing for others is just like second nature. And for me, what I want to do really is to be able to use what I have today, the ability to help people, if you know, to get started in a career, to expose them to a career, then those are the things that I want to be able to do to enable the success of others. And I love, you know, all fields. My son is a budding artist, and he's also a psychologist. And so he's always telling me, you know, Mom, you know, you're busy, you're running around, you're doing things for a lot of different people, and you know, you need to take time for yourself. And I tell him that this is an old saying, you all know it, that you know, there'll be plenty of time to rest when you're done. So while we're here, take advantage of it. And you know, I love being able to give back to others.
Excellent. Heidi, they've given us the 1 minute, so why don't you take us home with your response?
Oh, I'll be very quick. Beautiful things said. I'll give quick words on the things that are similar. Leadership, business, or community. My role in client development is really a coach to all of our teams, which I opted to do versus having my own team still, so I enjoy that, contributing to the greater whole. I guess rather be a coach than a player still. Service. So important in my life, from the mission work to various ways I serve now. And I'd end by saying the word love. And we've not said that much today. There's a gentleman named Arthur Brooks who used to chair the American Enterprise Institute. He's now a professor at Harvard. He's written a book on love. And it goes really deep into what's wrong with our culture, what's wrong with the divisiveness in politics, what divides people that could otherwise contribute together as love. And I, as a woman on International Women's Day in this incredible group, I think being a loving mother is, we can be leaders in our field and serve, but if we're not loving mothers, I will have failed. And I've very much focused on serving in organizations and in my firm, and I've realized with a teenager that if we can serve our kids, the own kids in our homes, we will set up this world to be a better place.
Thank you all
Very
so
well
much.
said.
Thank you for your great involvement.